You're listening to the Faith Breathed Hope podcast, episode number 163. Today, I talk with Christian trauma surgeon, high-level leader, motivational speaker, and co-host of a radio show, Dr. Craig Thayer. Dr. Thayer is here to share his stories of hope, inspiration, and belonging. His passion is to inspire and motivate others to live their life to the fullest. He believes that we are more alike than we know and shares how that he went through tragedy and found triumph, gained strength in adversity. Today we're here to talk about the miracles that changed my life, a journey of faith and hope. Welcome to the Faith Breathed Hope podcast, where we gain inspiration and motivation from others who share their touching stories of renewing hope and discovering purpose in any circumstance. I'm your host, Christina Reisinger, and today we will be encouraged by another tremendously inspirational topic that will embolden you to release fear, begin taking small steps forward, and move into your God-given purpose to live and serve in this life. Join me for today's story. Hello and welcome back to the Faith Breathed Hope Show. I am your host, Christina Reisinger, and today I am here with Dr. Craig Thayer. Hey, Dr. Thayer, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much.
I am so excited that you're here. And for our topic, the first thing that I always have my guests do is tell our audience a little bit something about themselves that maybe not everybody in your circle knows, something interesting.
There's a couple I can think of, but probably I'm a trauma surgeon, and so I do inflict scars on people, but I'm personally afraid of needles.
Oh, wow.
So wow. I can stick a needle anywhere in anything, and I'm okay. But when it comes to me, I'm worried that I may pass out getting my blood drawn or something.
Oh, wow.
Or a vaccine or a TB test that we have to get every year. So. Yeah.
I'll be a full disclosure. I'm personally afraid of needles too, but I've been poked my whole life. So it's unfortunately something you just have to deal with, but yeah. I get it. So today we are here to talk about miracles that have changed your life and how you have used faith and hope to persevere. So can you open up and maybe share in the beginning a little bit of your story? I know you've written a book or books, telling about your story, but if you want to give us a brief synopsis of what you've been through and
yeah, I mean, I would go on medical mission trips and I would think of my testimony about God, and because we would usually ask a couple of people to give those things at night after dinner. And I would have begun when I was born, but then I really thought about it, and what's in the book is it began before I was even born by a Christian mom in Michigan who was engaged, but her fiance wasn't going through catechism fast enough. So she started to show in the early 60s and would have been kind of ostracized at church. And so she moved to California and had me in Monterey, California, and then had me for 10 days and gave me up for adoption. Back then they didn't have foster systems. So I was an orphan for 9 months and adopted by an Irish mom and a great dad. So, and they've always been my mom and dad. So I think that's the first miracle, is that I'm even here today. But go on with that. I mean, just the quick events in my life. I was 11 and we were coming home, and my dad was in front of me. He opens the front door and my mom was on the ground laying there. He quickly closed the door and he picked her up and put her in bed. That's the first time we learned that she was an alcoholic and she was drunk. And so I actually went to my first AA meeting with her when I was 11, 12-ish. And that exposure made me an empath, a part of being an empath, and then just my mom raising me. And then these coincidences you see in your life, like the anatomy and physiology class that I took my junior year that told me, look, I love helping people. I was tutoring blind students in geometry, which you have to think outside the box because they can't see a circle. So you have to think the way they do and trace it with their finger. And then I worked with my hands. So getting into surgery was what I wanted to do when I was 16. And then I have a twisted intestine and I get an exposure to what it's like to be on I call it the dark side. And then head off to college. And my mom dies my freshman year. And my all male dorm floor says he'll never come back. And I did. And I finished because if I got off, the series, usually organic chemistry or those things are 3 quarters. And if you don't do A first quarter or B second, then you're off a whole quarter and you won't finish in 4 years. So, and I knew I wanted to go to med school. So in my sophomore year, I'm coming back from a bacteriology lab. I come around a corner and I was on the wrong side of the road. My bad. And a girl pulled out in front of me and I jackknifed my front wheel and went down head first and cracked my skull. And I remember going over to her and saying, "Are you okay?" And she said, "Fine." And the next thing I remember, I'm sitting on the curb and there's an ambulance in front of me. And later on, took me to the health center and they stitched my ear and I went back to the dorm room I was in. And then I couldn't hear out of the ear and there was spinal fluid coming out of my ear. I didn't know that. I just knew it was fluid and called the health center and they made an appointment for me the next day after my bacteriology midterm. And X-ray later, I was in the hospital for 2 weeks. So finishing that quarter with 18 units and organic chemistry, physics, biochemistry, bacteriology. It was crazy that I finished, and I did. And again, I was told by my friends, "You'll never make it." And then junior year, my dad gets diagnosed with lung cancer, 4th stage, so the worst. And I'm in a 5-person suite off-campus dorm, and there's a phone jack. I don't know if some of our younger folks know about old school phones, but they used to cost money when you had to call like from Davis to San Jose area in California. But this thing never had a charge. I would go to the office and they'd say, no charge. And it was never a charge we got. So every night I got to speak to my dad for free for 2 hours. And then he dies between my junior and senior year. And then I finished that year and applied to medical school, and I got 18 or more rejection, which is this thin envelope, and you just know it. And then I got one from UC Davis that was thin, and it said, "Congratulations, you've not been accepted." I'm like, "What?" And I was on a wait list. So it was a miracle that I got in to med school. But each step of my life, there were barriers and adversity, and God was there. I mean, you look back now, I grew up on Providence Court. What is that a coincidence? I mean, God provided for me.
One of the things I like to talk about is this idea that we as Christians sometimes start to think that because we're Christians, because we're seeking God's face, because we follow God and read scripture, that we might have a cushier lifestyle. And as you relay all the events in your life, and many people that I've been talking to that share their stories here and other places, we know that that's just simply not true. And scripture tells us that we're going to meet trials throughout our lifetime. Can you speak to those people and tell them, what you found, in scripture? Maybe you have a verse or something that you want to share that just empowers them to understand that God is with them. You just said God is with you, and you noticed that. Can you share that?
Correct. The verse I always think of is Psalms 23. I shall not want. God wants to put me in near quiet water, not running a waterfall or a stream, in a pasture for supply. And though the pronoun changes to my choice, though I choose the shadow of the valley of death, he's right behind me with his rod and staff. And as a shepherd, that's what shepherds use to guide their sheep on a steep hill or mountain. And so he's always there. And I'll tell you, moving from California for a number of reasons to Georgia was a big move. And when you make a big move as a Christian, Satan sees that you're a blip on the radar screen, and he will attack. And so, no, it is not easy. The last 2 years have not been easy for me. And luckily, I could sense this was, because you'd say things and people would misunderstand what you're saying. It's like the words. I felt like the Peanuts cartoon. The wow wow wow. They just don't hear what I'm saying. And I mean, you have to eliminate all pride in your life, and then know that God's there. This battle is bigger than you. And when the battle's bigger than you, you have to turn to God, because He'll fight it for you, and He's already won. So, yeah, and the interesting thing was that my boys did Boy Scouts. They're both Eagles, and another assistant scoutmaster who's a fire captain. We're moving to Maine. And I told him at one of the outings, camping, I go, you be careful, because he's also Christian. This move is going to spark some spiritual attack on you and your wife. And sure enough, they were fighting, and him knowing that this was not them, it was, it was spiritual, totally helped them. They could realize, okay, we need to lean on God. We will get through this, no problem. And they did. So I got to help somebody.
That's great. I think that a lot of times when we go through things, people might say, well, like you're saying, like a move or anything that's big. And it doesn't have to be, I think, a move from state to state or country to country, but it can be any type of rite of passage, any kind of, maybe you're starting a business, you're starting a new job, you're having a baby, whatever. And somebody comes in and they say something to the effect of, well, the devil can have a stronghold in these situations because he sees you trying to draw closer to the Lord. He sees you trying to do what God wants you to do. And that may be true, where you see these spiritual attacks, but also is an opportunity to look to God, like you said, to just realize that He's there and seek His face even more and develop that relationship. It's not easy, but it is a definite opportunity to strengthen that through trust in the Lord. I'd like for you to talk about how you can recognize miracles. So let me show you how I'm talking, or where I'm going with this, is that a lot of times we go through life and we neglect to see the little things in life. And so you think of the word miracle and you think maybe this is huge, something really, really large. But I'm wondering if we notice like our blessings, those little things that we can take for granted on a day-to-day basis, would those be considered miracles as well?
Yeah, totally. I do medical missions, and I've done them since 2010. And there's a whole chapter or several chapters on these miracles that happened. I mean, one of those was just pictures that one of my friends took. We were in a closet, and there was one window across into my left, and I was sitting in the shade, shaded by a 4-drawer cream-colored metal filing cabinet. And he just snapped this black and white picture with his phone, handed it to me. He goes, "Hey, this looks pretty cool, huh?" And I go, "Do you see what's in this picture?" And again, if you didn't pay attention, you would have missed it. There's a clear plastic trash bag hanging off the top of the cream-colored filing cabinet, and there's a light coming out of the middle of the filing cabinet, and it's shining on my face in the shade. So there's no reason to have any light on that side of my face. And I handed it back. I said, "What do you see?" And he goes, "Oh my gosh." And at church, we were asked, or at least I was asked, to get up in front of the congregation and ask for a prayer. And I said, "Don't pray for our safety. God had us, but just unequivocally have God show His presence to us and the people that we're taking care of in Honduras." And that was one of them. And then later that day, in one of the operating rooms, it's a blue paper drape with the skin sticking through the middle of the hole. No other light there, but it's enveloping my hands. There's no shadow that my hand is casting. So just those things are, if you didn't stop and look, you wouldn't see him.
Right. And we could probably do this by documentation. I'm sure that you get a lot of chances to see miracles and the trauma. Of course, there's also, a lot of tragedy, I'm sure. Can you talk about how you can change your perspective and looking at a situation and saying, hey, this is a tragedy, to saying, hey, there's a miracle in this particular tragedy?
You give me chills. So the big event that I went through was a family going up to Tahoe in an SUV. They'd just eaten lunch. They were out in the middle of nowhere, and he falls asleep and rolls the vehicle into the river. First miracle. It's a kind of rainy day. There's a kayaker on that river whose dad is a surgeon. So he's learned a fair amount about first aid and safety stuff. He's the first responder. There was a paramedic unit that had just passed that site that were being trained in a rapid water rescue. There was a CHP that was just pulling up on the scene, didn't know anybody was off. The kayaker ran up, got the kids out of the car. There were 3 girls, 2 twins, and then one older one. One had a femur fracture. One started to have a seizure. So once there were responders there, they were driven to a level 1 trauma center. And then the wife is holding his head out of the water so he doesn't drown, held by the seatbelt. The seatbelt's what saved him. The kayaker runs up to the top of the road. CHP's right there. They radio for the unit to come. I hear all these things, and he's in my ER, and I'm like, this guy's protected by God. I should, this should be really easy. And then suddenly, God goes, nope, I'm giving you back the reins. So he has like bilaterally dropped lungs from rib fractures. He's got a pelvic fracture. He has a femur fracture. He has a closed head injury. He's got a ruptured spleen, and he's on a blood thinner because he's got latent factor 5 deficiency. So rush him to the OR, take out a spleen, and then 2.5 months later, he's transferred to outpatient because he wasn't even from this town, about 50 miles away. So, but he survived. I mean, the fact that he survived that is a miracle. And again, I felt like God's totally got this. And then, nope, it was proof that, yeah, there are miracles that save people, but then you also need to take action. And that's my job. So.
Definitely. And I think a lot of times we miss the blessing, we miss the miracle, and we don't want to downplay the tragedy because it is it does affect our emotions and our heart and how we feel about life and our experiences. But when we're able to see the miracle, when we're able to see the goodness in the situation, if you can do that, that's what helps you move forward and let you know that the Lord is there for you and he's going to make things good for you and his kingdom.
Right.
So you've written a book and it's called Saved. And I'm going to read the title here. It's One Trauma Surgeon's True Account of the Miracles of His Life. I looked at the book and we talked about it. I haven't had a chance to read it, but I am looking forward to getting ready to read it. But the first chapter, I believe, it said a person's challenge is another's benefit. And I would like for you to speak to that, because when we go through tragedy, when we go through trauma, it can be so easy to be self-consumed and say, oh gosh, my heart is broken. I was like that when our daughter died. Somebody made a comment about how, maybe you're supposed to be there to help somebody else. And my first reaction, probably not out loud, but it definitely inside was, I don't want to do this. God, any other thing but taking my child, please, I'll speak, but let me be able to do so without this trauma, without this tragedy, without this heartache. So we have to come to a place where
God gives us that peace that surpasses our human understanding so that we can pour into others. Will you speak to that piece for that person who's out there and they need some encouragement? And they say, I don't think I can use my story to benefit anyone.
Yeah, and I've had that happen on mission trips where one of the construction guys, they were building a well, and he's like, I just don't feel like I'm using my talent or my gifts. And I go, what are you doing? Well, you're putting it, how many people will that give clean water to? 5,000 a day. And I said, you're saving potentially 5,000 lives every day. I come out and I operate on 48 people. I mean, that's a bigger purpose than mine, right? Even my own hands. I went to Haiti almost a year after the earthquake, and I didn't have an anesthesiologist, so it was like all I could do was local, numbing medicine type things. And then we had cholera, and the miracle there was I went to this cholera clinic, and paramedics could put IVs in people, so that skill set wasn't needed. But the babies were dying. No one can get an IV in them to give them fluids and resuscitate them. And I mean, they weren't even moving. Their eyes were sunken. And I go over to the supply table, and there's this box of these 14 gauge gigantic needles that are solid metal. And I'm like, I can put that through their shin bone into the marrow, and I can give them fluid that way. It's called an interosseous line. And that's what I did. And I mean, God used me. I felt like I had nothing to give there, really. But I mean, there's always hope. On a bigger scale, the last chapter in the book is a friend of mine who, I'm not going to give all the details away, because if I were to say, if you didn't read anything, read that last chapter if you want hope. It's the power of prayer. Mm-hmm. And a friend of mine who was a complete atheist, Vietnam War. I think he was Christian when he was younger, but just completely not wanting. And I prayed for him the last few days of his life, and what happened was miraculous. But he found God unequivocally by what I saw. And again, you got to read the book. So, or at least the last chapter. It's Ralph. So I mean, there's always hope, and your skills will always be used. I mean, I think, motivational speakers, inspirational speakers, those things last for about a week. What really needs to happen is you need to find your gifts, and you need to find out how you want to use those, and find that passion. Like that's how I got through my adversity and probably being stubborn. But just find the gifts and use them and be bold. Yeah.
Yes. God is really speaking, because the last few interviews that I have had have talked about that very thing, about finding your gifts and your talents and being able to use those for the kingdom. So, Dr. Thayer, would you give the audience a little bit of added encouragement in the area of being able to see the miracles in their life and trust the Lord for those miracles?
Yeah. So a real simple way is just think about the last year or your life overall, and think of the words coincidence, lucky, luck, impossible, really rare, and just put the word God in those. And then I think, if you're a believer, you're going to see where those were miracles in your life. I mean, that's kind of find the miracles in your life. That's key, because then God is still with us and still there for us.
Yes. Yes. Well, thank you so much. I'd love for you to share with the audience where they can find you, and tell where they can find your book as well.
So it's on Amazon. You can just if you just put my name and then saved, it should come up. Or probably a better site, just my webpage, which is Craig Thayer. It's T as in Tom, Hayer .net. So CraigThayer.net. It's got a link to the Amazon website for the book. It's also got things that I'm doing. I have dyslexia, which I only learned about 8 years ago, which you think someone that takes as many tests as I have to, even every year, still. I always felt I'm just a slow reader. I panic about a big test, an 8-hour test. I count the time and minutes and divide the questions by the minutes, and then I know how much time I have, and if I'm falling behind, then and I worry more about that than anything else. But yeah, so I did an Audible, which was painful, but I did a Facebook survey, and it said, should I do one? Yes, everybody said yes. And then, should I do the Audible? And I finished it 2 days ago. I did the last final clips that needed to be redone for background noise or whatever. So I haven't heard it in its entirety, but I don't know. It could be kind of funny.
That's good. So everybody look for that. The information to Dr. Thayer's website and the book will be in the show notes as well. So you can go down to those links and click that, and look forward to hearing the Audible that comes out.
Yes, yeah.
And I really have enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much.
Me too. I was looking so forward to talking with you and just being here.
Well, I'm so glad that you are here. And for you guys out there, continue to be blessed and bless others, and we'll see you next time. And I want to thank you for joining us on Faith Breathed Hope, where you gain inspiration and motivation to renew hope and discover purpose in any circumstance. Please like and share this podcast and give us a review on iTunes. Be blessed.